All right, checking volume 1, 2, 3. It is on and recording. Well, howdy there, folks. Welcome to Tweedledee and Tweedledum.
Frick one, Frick.
yeah, exactly. We've got Professor Cole here with me today.
Associate Professor Chris.
Yeah, as we really are talking about some differences that we have identified between what we call precursor patterns, patterns in which have been carried down through several generations now of Kenpo practitioners, to more other influences that have pushed forward what we teach to our students here in Christian Kenpo. And so specifically, I wanted to go over, and I'm sure Professor Cole will have his comments as well, as to how do these advances, how does pushing forward of these things change our patterns? To quote a Rich, who said at a seminar once you're a black belt, that you don't do the techniques like you did when you were a yellow belt, an orange belt, purple belt, etc. And so in thinking about that for the last, 8 years or so, has made us come to some of these conclusions. And so in order to examine this for a minute, I wanted to walk through in the air for a moment a precursor pattern, delayed sword, and show you how I had originally learned it, and then also show you now how we will be showing the students once they reach green, brown, black belt, how they should start moving, including outside influences beyond just your AKA standard Kenpo. With that, Mr. Cole, back up for a minute as I walk through the patterns in the air. First up, we're going to be looking at delayed sword. As we are talking about, instead of a neutral bow being a static stance in which you want to get the Kodiak moment and hit that perfect neutral bow, the word that consistently has been coming to our mind is transitory. I don't know how many times you can read the encyclopedia or the Infinite Insights and not see the word transitory throughout the language. And so in order to accomplish that, what does a transitory neutral bow look like? Is there a before and is there an after? Yes, both and. So in delayed sword, I'm going to face your direction, as I step back to a neutral bow includes something that we have now identified, originally called funky stance, but now is called the high neutral bow, in which I step back naturally. I'm going to frame. As I heel up, heel down, going to strike the wrist, cat, kick, point of origin to point of contact with the chop. That is the precursor pattern in postmodern Kenpo. Now the way that we're going to approach it from this point on, no matter the student, is taking more of the outside influences and taking something what we call a double tap. It is where we get these from several of our precursor techniques, in which it's not just one hand striking, but now we want to manipulate more of height, width, and depth. So once again, I'm going to step back naturally to that high neutral bow. I'm going to frame. As my heel goes down and as I rotate, I am going to tap one, tap two, cat, kick, and then the chop comes from point of origin to point of contact. I'd like to show you guys for a moment what that looks like on a body. I'm going to borrow Professor Cole here for a moment. As he comes in, and very slowly at first, he grabs. This is what we would call the catalyst. And what is your intent?
My intent could be a lot of things, but as a Kenpo guy, I like that one right there. I like either a push after the catalyst, which would be a suffix, or a pull, which is also a suffix, because my hand is already up. Now I'm naturally checking for that chop. But the next thing is I could drop into any pattern, any precursor pattern. We know what that is. So I want to suffix, prefix, I want to do something other than just the attack, because this is my catalyst, and that might be my intent, or this might be in my intent, headbutt, or this might be in my intent to use this as a point of a fulcrum point. So I can do a lot of things from that because I have a large vocabulary of motion, as does Seafood Chris.
So I'm going to show the precursor pattern as I originally learned it. As I step back naturally, notice what that does to the opposite weapon. I'm canceling the intent. Notice also I've already affected his depth and his height at the same time. I'm going to frame. As I rotate, heel up, heel down in the transitory neutral bow, what we would call funky stance, and now the high neutral bow. As I rotate, I'm going to first tap with the left at the wrist, and the right hand is going to tap at the radial nerve right by just before the elbow joint. As I rotate 1 and then 2, I'm going to rotate and cat. This introduces a lesson within the technique called a survey. From here, I can see if there's another opponent, but I can also see his response to my defense. In Christian Kenpo, we would also call this a mercy point. I have the choice of starting a dialogue or a discussion with the individual and decide whether to continue the technique. For instance, let's say that I want to continue the technique. I'm going to kick and chop. Since he rose up, I'm going to formulate, not change the target, but change the weapon. Instead of being an outward hand sword, it became a forearm hand sword combination. It became more of a moving block than it did a strike. Once again, a little bit faster in the precursor pattern. Step back naturally, canceling his catalyst and intent. Slap. Cat, kick, chop. Or in this case, forearm. Yeah. I'm aiming to go diagonally like a seatbelt across his sternum. Or if I get one vertical dimension, that's fine. I'm still going to be canceling height and depth at the same time with it. Now with the more updated or influenced version, as Sigung, in other words, Professor Cole comes in, he starts the catalyst. I'm going to step back naturally as I did before to create distance. Distance is our friend, right? But now I'm going to be, shall we say, more flowery with our hands, taking an influence of Polynesian dancers. I'm going to frame again. This is positional checks, right? As I rotate and heel goes down, I'm preventing that other one from coming up, but I'm going to follow it. Rather than stopping, I'm going to continue through. Notice the position change on Professor Cole. Notice his rotation. I'm actually corkscrewing him into the ground and canceling the ability of the left hand. I'm going to cat and kick as I did before, but notice I've got a variety of different options as far as targets now, right? I've got, if I want to go to the neck, I can. But since his head is down, I can always just strike to the the collarbone. And then from that point of contact, use that as a fulcrum, as we said before, and elbow sandwich. Bring him up, and then continue with whatever. So once again, a smidge faster with the new formulation or the new presentation.
Which is that high neutral bow.
Which is the high neutral bow, or what we used to call funky stance. As he pushes, step back. And notice as I end the technique, as I did the step drag forward to bring the truck with the bumper, I'm still in that high neutral bow. I'm not landing in that perfect neutral bow with my hands out like Elvis and take a picture, please. Instead, as I land, it's My back heel's up, ready for action. Comments, Professor?
Okay. This high neutral bow, this wording is basically this week.
This week.
When Chris decided to put a stamp on Christian Kenpo, he basically eliminated beginners learning how to do a neutral bow. And I was like a little put off because I saw it and I spent the last 30 freaking years trying to figure out how to make that neutral bow work. And I come up with a lot of things that helped, but I had to raise my expectations before I got here. I had to change my expectations when I got here because everything I saw the students doing was technically correct and physically correct when they did a step drag and these things. So this high, what we're now calling a high neutral bow, it manipulates our height and our depth. I'm sorry, height and our depth.
In our depth, yeah.
Then we go to the transitory neutral bow, and there's the manipulation of width. Why? Because it gets to here. So, I did a video in my garage 11 years ago, 12 years ago, about talking about this first the correct neutral bow and how to step back naturally. So Chris has just taken it here, and now we're either going to go forward from it, or we're going to go to the transitional and then move through it. One of the interesting things about this is that, thanks to Dave Crouch, we know about kinetic linking. As I pivot to that neutral bow, I strike with my weight on my front foot. Okay? I don't land and then strike here where I'm 50-50 in a neutral bow. Neutral bow's fine, but it's transitory, as Chris has said. And it should always be transitory. One of the things that you saw, sorry, I did a little steep over there. One of the things you saw me doing, I'm just going to do the attack. I did not do this from a neutral bow to this to a neutral bow, which I've seen a lot of people do their attacks, and stop in a neutral bow. I didn't do this and stop in a neutral bow. Okay. What I did was I stood here, because this depth gives me the ability to push in. This is my catalyst. My intent was to push and to continue to push without being overly aggressive. If I stand further away, if I stand like this in a neutral bow, okay, kind of looks like clutching feathers, I understand that. But being this far away, whether my feet are together, if I'm reaching or if I'm in neutral, it says pull. So if you're wearing a heavy jacket or wearing something heavy on your shirt, this is going to be, thank you. Raining claw, thanks. So RI, CI, these things are important to us, and they're important to our students. So remember, I did not stand in a neutral bow. My catalyst is this, my intent was this, my second intent was this, depending on if he doesn't do anything. He doesn't put his hands up, he doesn't back up even more, doesn't dislodge my arm, which is what the Lade sword is teaching you, to hit the wrist or hit the forearm, either or, right? And I didn't stand this far away and reach out, and I didn't stand in a neutral bow and like this. And I'm definitely, when it comes to sword of destruction, I'm not going to come here and then step to a neutral bow and stop. This is the criticism, and a valid criticism, of American Kenpo. If I'm going to throw, we're not going to do sword of destruction, but if I'm going to throw a punch, and I'm going to go that way, bam, I'm more in a horse stance, because that's what I want for the next strike. The catalyst is the punch. The step through motion to the side horse allows me to go to a high neutral bow. Boom, boom, boom. And I can continue on with something like alternating mace on the opposite side. So I encourage you, if you're a Kenpo person and you're listening to this, watch out for the neutral bow. Watch out for stopping in the neutral bow as they attack. Because there was a video of Mr. Parker saying he wished he had spent more time on the attack. We are. Mm-hmm. He encouraged us. Okay.
With that, stay tuned as we will be discussing alternating maces and sword of destruction here, and looking back, going all the way back to the beginning of the system and asking how, quote-unquote, deleting the traditional neutral bow and using the high neutral bow, formerly funky stance, has affected our Kenpo. It's not necessarily your Kenpo. It's not necessarily the Kenpo that's out there. but it's the Kenpo that we're going to be teaching to our students. With that, stay tuned. But before you guys go, we have a few thank yous in which to present to the community. This is not done in isolation. This is done in and through influences both within and without of Kenpo. Within Kenpo, we really want to thank Dr. Dave Crouch. We want to thank Rich Hale and Rich Post and Clyde O'Brien as being impetus and catalysts for us to continue forward in a study of motion and what is the Kenpo that we teach, to make it ours, and then to continue that with our students. I know Ms. Cole had a few thank yous to add to that.
Well, first of all, thank you for Pat Salantri for sticking with me and teaching me the entire system up through the 154, working with me on my forms with my son Jack. Happy birthday, Jack! You're 30. And also